Okay, hopefully you have your writing paper ready to go. If you are lucky enough to have the dotted line paper, that would be perfect. If not, and you're like me, you have a spiral notebook, hopefully somebody was able to draw lines for you. I have a line, and then you skip a line, that's my dotted line, and then my base line. Then we skip one line in between. Okay? So I already put my lines on there today to save time. Let's double check that you're sitting up nice and straight in your seat. You want to scoot your chair all the way in until your belly is touching the desk and your back is touching the back of the chair. That's proper writing position. And I always put my hand that I don't write with on my paper to hold my paper so it doesn't slide around. Because if it slides around, then my letters are going to be all crazy. Okay, the first letter that we are starting with is our new one. It says S, Z. Say it with me. S, Z. Go ahead and write it, and you can watch with me. It's actually a clock letter. Actually, we'll start on the clock. We start at 2 o'clock, and we go around the top of the clock to 10. But then we stop. We go diagonally down to 4, and then around the bottom of the clock to 8. So try that with me. Put your finger on your paper or up in the air. 2 o'clock, around to 10, diagonal to 4, around to 8. So let's try that on our paper. We start at 2 o'clock. Remember, this is under that midpoint or that dotted line. Up and over the clock, diagonally across and around the bottom of the clock. Up and over the clock, diagonally across and around the bottom of the clock. So this top portion here, this one's a little bit funky. The top portion and the bottom portion should be fat enough to fit a clock in. What we don't want to see is a super skinny S like that. So 2 o'clock, up and over, around, and around the bottom of the clock. So that you could fit a whole clock inside of this S. That's how fat it is. So as I write, I want you to go S, Z, S, Z, S, Z, S, Z. So you go all the way to the end of the paper. I was able to do 1, 2, we won't count that one, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 S's. You might be able to fit more S's or less S's. They don't need to be touching, remember. So see the spaces that I have in between? That's good. We don't need 100 S's on this line. Just maybe around 5 to 10 S's that are good S's. That's what I want to see. So I definitely want spaces in between. All right. Now we're going to go to the next one. So if you're not done with your S's, pause the video now. All right. The next sound, put your hand out, goes ah, o, oo. Say it with me. Ah, o, oo. Go ahead and write it. Ah, o, oo. This is an O. So remember, it starts at 2 o'clock. It goes around the clock, back up to 2. 2 o'clock, around the clock, back up to 2. 2 o'clock, around the clock, back up to 2. Just making sure that they're nice and fat. And when we do it, we're making sure that it's sitting right on this baseline and that it's not going above this dotted line. It should be touching the dotted line and touching the baseline. And we don't want anything super skinny like that. Making sure it's not hanging down like this either. Double check. Look at all of mine are touching that baseline. Ah, o, oo. Ah, o, oo. Ah, o, oo. All right. So make sure that you've gone all the way to the end of the paper. If you have not, go ahead and push pause. And if you're ready, you can keep playing, and we're going to go to the next sound. The next sound is G, J. Say it with me. G, J. Go ahead and write that letter. Okay, that letter should be a G. Starting at 2 o'clock, you go around the clock back up to 2. It almost looks like an O to start. Then remember, you pull straight down and you go around the bottom of the clock again, and that tail sits right on that next line. Let's try that again. So 2 o'clock, around the clock, back up to 2, pull down, and that needs to be a big fat tail that you can fit a clock in. G, j, g, j, g, j, g, j, g, j. Remember, it says g normally, and it says j when that I, E, or Y come to scare it. Make sure you finish your G's going all the way across the page. If you're not done, push pause. Finish your G's all the way across because you're going to need to take a picture and upload it. All right, if you are done with your G's, we're going to go down to the next line. The next letter says F. Say it with me. F. Go ahead and write it. Remember, this is a tall letter. It still starts at 2 o'clock, but it's going to start at 2 o'clock up on this top line here. So 2 o'clock, up to the top, up and over the top of the clock, straight down. This is one of the only ones where you actually get to pick up your pencil. So I get to pick up my pencil and then do a tiny crossbar right on that dotted line. Let's try again. 2 o'clock, up to the top, pull straight down, tiny crossbar. 2 o'clock, up to the top, pull straight down, tiny crossbar. Make sure this area on the top of your F is nice and fat. You could fit a clock inside. And when I go through my F's, I want to say that way I'm training my brain. This letter says make sure you go all the way to the end of your paper. If you're not done with your F's, push pause. If you are finished with your F's and you're ready to move on with me, then you can continue to play. The next sound says D. D. Say it with me. D. Making sure that your teeth are closed. Go ahead and write it. This starts short, so it starts at 2 o'clock. You go up and around the clock, back up to 2. Kind of looks like an O to start. Don't pick up your pencil. Remember, we go straight up to that top line, and we got to trace it straight back down to that bottom line, and you have a tiny little tent there. Let's try it again. 2 o'clock, around the clock, up to the top, down to the bottom. Remember, we don't want something like a loop, like that. Okay, 2 o'clock, around the clock, up to the top, down to the bottom. I did not pick up my pencil the whole time. 2 o'clock, around the clock, up to the top, down to the bottom. And when we write it, we want to say D. 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 Uh-oh, that one's not great. That one's hanging down. So I want to redo that one so I don't end on one that's not correct. D with a tiny 10. Okay, if your D's are not done, go ahead and pause and finish your D's all the way across the page. If you are ready, we're going to start on the next letter. The next sound is K, S, K, S. Say it with me. K, S. Go ahead and write it. The first sound is K. Second sound is S. Start at 2 o'clock, around the clock, up to 4 and stop. It kind of looks like an O with a chunk missing out of it. 2 o'clock, around the clock, stop at 4. 2 o'clock, around the clock, stop at 4. 2 o'clock, around the clock, stop at 4. 2 around, stop at 4. And I like to say K, S, K, S, K, S, K, S. Nice job. If you are not done writing your C's, go ahead and finish those now. If you are finished, then you can keep playing, and we're going to go down to that next line. And the next sound is A, Ah. Say it with me. A, Ah. Let's write it. So we start at 2 o'clock, around the clock, up to 2. It looks like an O. And then we pull straight down for a tiny tail. And you can see that little tent there. 2 o'clock, around the clock, up to 2, down to the baseline. 2 o'clock, around the clock, up to 2, and you pull straight down, and we say A, Ah. A, Ah. A, Ah. A, Ah. Ooh, Oops, that one's a little bit too tall. And I don't want to end on a messy one, so I'm going to do a new one. A-A-Ah. Excellent job, my friends. Alrighty, that was our last letter today. We are not going to do any words today because Miss Graykowski's ran out of space on my desk here. So we will do some words tomorrow. Just double check that you have written everything that I have written, making sure that you didn't skip any letters. You will take a picture of this in Seesaw and upload it to the Phonics page. Thank you for joining me today, friends. We'll see you tomorrow.